2024 tested us.
We say goodbye to the money.
What is your mission?
To make sure that the astronauts we send into space come back safely.
In the end, it's all about selecting opportunities.
Extremely essential to be agile.
Show me the value.
Kind of providing growth opportunities that really bring value today or next year and 5 years. That's really important.
I don't want a nice presentation about what's happening in 10 years. What can I do if we agree that this is the direction? What can I do tomorrow?
We can analyze the digital footprint of any organization out there, really looking at the data.
I don't want to put this information out into the world, or who's going to get it, and like what is the competitive risk and threat of all of that.
Different perspectives can lead to different opportunities or strategies.
There's no shortage of capital to deploy, but there's a huge degree of uncertainty about where to deploy it.
I need to make sure that I find all best possible solutions.
If you not innovate, then you will not be a leading company. So I think that's a critical point.
And then we actually worked with a lot of R&D teams and also using MAPEGY during brainstorm sessions. You tremendously open up the wealth of opportunities.
Probably such an analysis cost me like 2-3 weeks. Now you can do it within seconds.
If you order now, you get 20% discount on MAPEGY.
Done. Done, yeah. We are good, very good. ...2024 has tested, I'm sure it tested us, but I can imagine all businesses worldwide with, geopolitical tensions, definitely also economic turmoil, and definitely unpredictable markets. And as you know, I've figured out for my company itself is revenues are tighter if you talk to customers. There are also bankruptcies. And of course, it's, in my opinion, extremely essential to be agile. And in this environment, we've talked about it yesterday already, we need decisions that are tangible, that provide value, that are measurable. And yeah, what we at MAPEGY do is we provide actionable insights based on with our AI to support enterprises with insights on trends, on technologies, on competitors. And I'm very, very happy that you join me here today. Leaders from 2 companies. It's Martin and it's Tim from 10Ops, and it's Simon from WAZOKU. Thanks for being here in Berlin. And yeah, just introduced myself. I'm the CEO, founder of MAPEGY. And I would love to hear more about you, Tim and Martin. What about 10Ops? Who is 10Ops and what is your mission?
Well, we have quite an interesting mission, as I could say, let's say as founder and also managing partner of 10Ops. In the end, it's all about selecting opportunities, identifying opportunities, but also really turning them into operations. So to really make it tangible and make sure that you also actually really do something with it. And of course, we do that with a very entrepreneurial spirit. So we really challenge the status quo. We're always interested, let's say, to work with forward-thinking leaders, people that really want to challenge the status quo, want to do things different, but also, let's say, have the opportunity to really put bold resource allocations on these opportunities to really make them tangible. And that's something that we enjoy very much together with our clients. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work, especially in this environment where indeed there are a lot of dynamics all over the world. But it also comes with opportunities. And as 10Ops, as an opportunity company, that's also something that we love, where we help our clients to really make it tangible. Yeah.
Very interesting. I never asked you that before, but what does it 10 stand for? Is it like you have like 10, why not 100? Why not one opportunity?
In the end, you only need a couple of opportunities to really, let's say, make a difference. So 10 on one part also stands, let's say, for our digital approach. So we think that is very, very important, let's say, to also have a good foundation. And I think that's also, let's say, where we love to work together with MAPEGY. So it stands also, let's say, for the amount of opportunities. But if you identify them, it's also selecting the right ones, and then also working and making them tangible. So yes, 10 can be 100, but in the end, it's about selecting those few that really make a difference.
And Simon?
Well, thank you for having me here, first of all, and lovely to be back in Berlin. So WAZOKU is very much working through the power of what we call connected collective intelligence. And so one of the one of the challenges I think that we face in all this volatility and uncertainty as innovators is that quite often we're dealing with very disparate, disconnected data sets from the trends and sensing sides upstream of where to focus, which opportunities to pursue, all the way through to the, the delivery, the scaling of our innovations and beyond. That there is no central system of record. There's no harmonized data set that's looking at the very nuanced innovation lens of problem solution fit. There's lots of other pieces of enterprise tech that do different things with a similar data set, an analogous data set. And so from a WAZOKU perspective, for the last 10 years, and we've been through these cycles, right? We've seen ups and downs, we've seen innovation teams come and go. But what's remains true is it's that innovation as a data set is still highly fragmented, that the resources around it are moved and shifted around quite frequently, and therefore the continuous learning, the shared knowledge that aids decision-making, that supports projects from initial selection all the way through to scaled delivery really doesn't exist, right? It's still highly fragmented. And so from a WAZOKU perspective, we believe strongly that the tools of crowdsourcing and the tools of synthetic intelligence, AI, so human plus synthetic, can drive exponential value in the right opportunity areas, right? And so, we'll talk later about building ecosystems and developing more collaborative, shared ways of working. It's all nice theory, but without a data set and a structured way of working behind it, right from the top of the enterprise down, you're still really sailing blind, right? And there's no other bit of a business that does that. The finance team wouldn't survive without a financial system. Sales and marketing wouldn't survive without a CRM and the associated set of toolings. Innovation's as important, if not more important, a horizontal capability, and yet lacks a central data set. And so that's what WAZOKU is trying to bring to market collaboratively with great organizations like you guys and more globally.
Mm-hmm. Is there any, I was reflecting a bit on a global level on 2024. Is there main 3 points that you kind of consider that you learned in 2024, being now end of November?
It's a difficult that we learned. I think it starts with an observation, whether that is geopolitical. You see companies going back, let's say, to protectionism, going back to the region. Security of supply becomes really important. We see import duties being raised. So the landscape is changing, and that's just an observation. The question is, what do you do with it? And some companies, if the winds are changing, some companies start to build walls, and some companies start to build windmills. And we always say those windmills are really the opportunities that we are looking for. And that's also, let's say, the companies and the people that we really would like to work with. So they are open to do things different. They are willing to challenge what they have been done before. And I think you rightfully mentioned a culture, let's say agility. We often refer to it as adaptability. I think that will become even more and more important, also in combination, let's say, with technologies, with AI, etc. Having a culture that is adaptable and willing to change, willing to absorb new technologies, boost productivities, and look for new things. Yeah, that is extremely, extremely important. So looking back, observation, yes, a lot of things are changing, but also, let's say, it's also creates opportunities for those that are really willing to see those opportunities.
And then maybe to add to this also, what we see is that you go away from just we want to innovate, we want to do something, and it needs to be tangible, it needs to be pragmatic. It should not only be long-term, there needs to be a short-term and a mid-term gain where you basically say, look, it brings something back, and if you don't have, at least you need evidence, right? So I think that's also where, we work together also to create evidence and to say, look, there are indicators in the market that see that this is maybe not a good idea or this isn't a good idea, right? And then what in our conversations we see that more and more happening is that, I want to do something tomorrow. I don't want a nice presentation about what's happening in 10 years. I want to say, what can I do if we agree that this is the direction? What can I do tomorrow? Give me evidence or create proof points. And I think that is also something that we get from all ends, I think. Which is perfect because that's also what our business model is. But I think that also has changed tremendously in the last years.
Yeah, I'm coming from the foresight business. That's where I started at Volkswagen, doing scenario techniques, talking to experts, looking beyond 10 years, even 30 years, since the life cycle of the automotive industry is longer than 3 decades. And what I experience and feel now, okay, but if I talk about measurable success and measuring innovation, is like, if you think midterm, you think of 3 years. We discussed it today in the morning. Long term is 5 years, and actually kind of providing growth opportunities that really bring value, not in 10 or 20, 30 years, but really already today or next year and 5 years. That's really important. Being a data-driven company, of course, we need to be in a driving seat to kind of measure innovation, how it happens, and that's our mission.
Yeah.
And Simon.
Well, I think I'd echo all those points. There's no shortage of capital to deploy, but there's a huge degree of uncertainty about where to deploy it and how best to deploy it. And that's being driven by, on the flip side, a move partly through corporate nervousness, which I think is cyclical, not just because of economic concerns, but generally cyclical. That means that there's not a huge desire to put in a lot more OpEx, right? We've gone through CapEx reduction curves, and then software came along, and other, and businesses were looking at, other ways of bringing talent into their organizations. I think we're in a part of the market right now where it's about outcomes. It's about, deploying probably larger sums of money into a smaller, discrete set of well-targeted problem areas. And on top of that, this high degree of uncertainty of what tomorrow really looks like, right? There's a lot of nervousness right now of pinning hopes on anything, because who knows what the AI quantum shift posts just around the corner, right? And is that going to change more? Is it going to change less? Is it actually going to be another hype bubble that doesn't drive anything? And so there's this kind of nervous excitement, I think, that's sitting there, and this pool of money that needs to find a different way of deploying itself than it has for the last decade, as SaaS came through and people were licensing capabilities that now they kind of don't want to, right? And IT teams are pulling back, finance teams are pulling back. The one thing that hasn't changed, and I think that I've been pushing innovation teams and businesses for years on, is show me the value, right? And like, that's the bit of all of this, really. And the number of times that I've sat on panels with innovation leaders from senior businesses, it's not about value, Simon. It's not about that. It's about other things. Very few of them are in the hot seat anymore, because of course it's about that, right? And so it has to be driven by outcomes. We are starting to realize that reality in this cycle. I hope we remember it this time, because we've been through these cycles several times, right? Inside businesses, outside businesses, as service providers to businesses or whatever.
I think, yeah, we fully agree to that. And that's also why you always say we are not going to do boil the ocean projects that take 2 years. No, it's about 6-9 months, but also really show the impact. And we also talk to a lot of teams, and they say, well, what we do, it cannot be measured, not with the KPIs, let's say, for our business. We would like to challenge that because we think you're also part of this, and whether you add to bringing, let's say, an adaptable culture in a company, but also really to build a pipeline for your company for business development, make sure that you unlock, let's say, pockets of growth for your company, and all of that can be measured. So I think you as innovation teams, yeah, you owe it to the company, but also everybody, let's say, that is willing to invest in it, to say, hey, this is what we do, and this is what we are contributing. So we very much agree to that. And yeah,
do you have a specific example that you kind of can shed more light on, like what parts of the business and how you approach these things, the concept that you kind of use at TenOps?
Yeah, maybe you can add that. So basically what we do is we first look at a company. We do kind of a quick scan. So that gives us an outside-in perspective of the company, that we basically don't introduce our company, we introduce the company of the client, and then opens a lot of conversations. They are, okay, we see this, we didn't know you see this, right? And then in the next step, if we say, okay, we want to move along, then we actually start to do an opportunity scan. So that means we do really a full scope opportunity scan. We also look into internal information. We do interviews with stakeholders. So that gives a full picture of the organization. We also start to validate things. Of course, data nowadays, and also if you know the sources, is quite accurate, but still we need to put that into perspective, right? So in the end, an information is an information, but if you put it into context with also business leaders, you know what it means for the business, right? So that is also where we create hypotheses and then validate them and see, okay, this is not a picture we have. So what opportunities are there for your organization? Which ones are the most important ones? What are the criteria? How do we measure them? And then we turn them into operations. You need to do this, you need to do this project, this project, this project. Then we also go into scenario planning and so on. And also to go a little bit back to the point that we had earlier, what is important for us is to, boil the ocean projects or monster projects. We're not going to say, oh, and then in 3 years, you're going to have this return. If I can have this return in 3 years, then I will have a little bit of return on an earlier point. So why don't I look into a huge innovation project, but I'm not looking at innovation cycles, almost like sprints we have in digital, right? So let's invest maybe now 20K for a pilot program where we already improved 2%. If we can prove this, we also believe that we can do 20% down the road, and then basically take it step by step. And then to see also, if you look at the organization, okay, you have improved tremendously here, but here also there's a huge gap. So instead of bringing that all the way to the end, maybe we start looking into this one. What are the dependency of all these things? So really to make on a relatively short period of time the highest impact possible that actually links to the key KPIs and goals of the organization.
Mm-hmm. And whom do you talk to if you talk to your customers or enterprises? Is it like the innovation managers, or is it the business developers, or?
Yeah, I think especially in nowadays, right? So I think it's very important that there's always a business angle. So of course we could start dreaming up castles with an innovation department, but in the end there needs to be a business need, right? It needs to, do we want to work with startups? Okay. Do we need to diversify? Is there a reason why we need to step into these markets? So usually we start with a business angle. That could be VP, that could be directors, management, right? To really understand what are opportunities for them. What is the market situation? Are they looking for growth? Do they need to diversify? What is it? And on that basis, we start, okay, who else do we need to talk to on that basis, right? So do we need to talk to the R&D department? Do we need to talk to the sales department? And then we drill further down, depending on what the opportunities are that we want to focus on.
So connecting these different business units and bringing value in this ecosystem.
Yeah, and also reflecting on what is their contribution to the company goal. Because often you have things that are, as a quality department, okay, yeah, we want to do innovation in our quality department. We want to reduce cost of serving, whatever. Yeah, why should we focus on it? If I calculate the opportunity costs of the current process, and I say even you go for an interim infrastructure or whatever, you go from a very entrepreneurial point of view, you just take almost like a balance sheet. This is what you put in, this is what you get out. It makes sense, let's go for it. Right? Giving the possibility and the visibility of these opportunities, that does something, right? So you also give a little bit of voice to departments that otherwise maybe not are on the priority number one list, and you give them possibility to show their contribution to the strategy of the organization. And that is often underestimated. Yeah.
Significantly underestimated, I think, to more to that point. I think what I believe needs to happen, and why I think there's a gap at the top of the enterprise, is, look, there's an innovation team that might be working in whatever language we choose to use, right? But sort of the business of tomorrow, right? Horizon 3, Horizon 2+, whatever you want to call it, like, radical innovation or something else. They're trying to work on the business of tomorrow. And there's a business development team and an operations team who are working on the business of today, and there's this kind of bit in the middle. We've tended to break those out into discrete businesses, and the further from the core to actually really detach them. From a data set perspective, we need to not do that, right? Otherwise, it's really hard for a variety of reasons to bring all the continuous learning, but actually to plug the two back together. You end up with, at the end of the day, I don't know, a British plug and a European plug socket, and they won't come back in, and the antibodies don't make it work. But not only that, like, huge parts of the organization are those antibodies. I don't think they're antibodies. I think they're processes and their structures and their incentives, and they are all the things that the business needs to make this thing work. There was this classic example of during the pandemic, during COVID in the US, where they created the ability to spin out free COVID tests really quickly. And for months and months and months, these free COVID tests sat there doing nothing because they couldn't distribute them. And the conclusion was that the innovation didn't stand because the US healthcare system was opposed to giving away free things, right? And it became, well, this is a business model innovation challenge, where the regulators against us, the corporates are against us. The reality was that there was a computer update that needed to happen that allowed them to put $0.000 0 cents into the sales thing because they couldn't. There was no ability to put zero in. It was a process improvement at a technology level, which is why you need to connect the dots together, because otherwise procurement or finance or IT or someone else at a very basic level can disrupt this innovation that you've done and kill it, right? Or in this case, have real life consequences for months and months and months on end because we think it's something different. And so we've got to find better ways at harmonizing these things and recognizing there are bits of our organizations that need to be plugged in. They need to be digitized. They need to do other things. And there's so many parts of the business that have put in good processes, but they're non-digitized, right? They're not, and they don't learn from it. There's no way, and so it can't feed back in to create the value. And often it blocks the value that other bits are creating. So I think your point is spot on, and we've got to keep looking in there and go, where's the real blocker?
And I think also maybe to add to this, we always say we want to challenge status quo. That sounds like a nice claim, but what was really behind it is like, if you come with something disruptive, something new in an organization, you say, you prove that isn't a good idea. Well, I think in the current situation of your organization, maybe, you need to prove that this is a bad idea. Because if you keep going like this and you plan a scenario and say, okay, if you keep going like this is what's going to happen, right? And I think also a lot of corporations, it's like, if it's not on the slide deck, it doesn't exist, right? So there's no case if you don't have a slide deck about it. So, and what happens is that you have a lot of iterations in your organization, and it goes to senior people, it goes back there. If you calculate the hours and the opportunity cost of doing this, and then you maybe on the other hand say, let's do a pilot for 10, 20K. You know what I mean? Then when we have evidence, we have something at hand. I had one incident, but with a colleague at one of my previous companies, and he said, look, you pulled off 2 programs here that you started, pilot programs, and I'm trying to set up this huge program, and I'm doing rounds and rounds. How did you do this? I was an external at the company. He worked there. I said, I didn't ask for a program. I gave the management the power to say no. Because what I do is I don't say, if I want to have a program, I need to have infrastructure, I need to know the technology needs to be, that will be there for years, and so on and so forth. Huge task. No one wants to sign off on that one. Huge investment, right? But I say, look, we're going to create a pilot. We say we agree on this, proof of concept, 3 months, this is the investment, we say goodbye to the money, and then you can still say no.
Yep.
And that time, the only thing I need to do is to make sure I get it up and running. I create a proof point that is realistic and really proves what I want to prove, and not say how we do hundreds of thousands of turnover. And I get customers. And then who's going to turn that one off, right? So I said, okay, let's try another 3 months. And then you get to a point where you say, really, I can prove it, and then I can scale it. And that is also something where we see that resonates very well, because it's a very pragmatic approach in the end.
Yeah, but it's still difficult for you guys coming in often to you've got to do those interviews and start to unpick all this data that's not easy to access, and it's very subjective at the point you receive it, and there'll be a whole load of stuff that's not said that could have been really valuable and useful to the thing that you're trying to do, right? Which is part of the piece we're trying to bring to bear a little bit more, is just make it easier to get at that data, right? I was with the innovation team of a large FMCG recently, and they were like, for their initial gambit was, if we could know everything that our business knew as an innovation team, we'd be infinitely more powerful than we are right now, because we're blind essentially, right? And then they'll get the cuts in budget or the disbursement of that innovation team 18, 24 months down the road because of whatever, but they've got both arms tied behind their back, really. Even with all the great tech that we can bring to it and all the great services, it's like, you always start from zero effectively, right?
I think the power of data is often underestimated, and that also has to do, of course, with the organization of the data, but even the data that is there, whether it's from internal or external or combined with experience of the company, I think it makes a huge difference. Maybe a question also to all of you. We see a lot at companies that there is a bit of a prejudice versus innovation or open innovation, that it is time consuming, that it is risky, and that it is costly. Our mission is also to show them, let's say, that the opposite can be true. And I think there, let's say, the component of having the right data in selection, but also building business cases, getting an outside-in view is crucial in our process. But I'm curious also to hear from you, what do you think about that? Do you see that same at companies? But also, what is your role in providing that data, providing these insights, in actually de-risking and speeding up these cycles?
Benny, So what our core competence or USP is that we can analyze the digital footprint of any organization out there. And it's interesting what you said before. First of all, big companies mostly don't know what they know themselves, the whole team. And what we can easily do within seconds or minutes is to kind of provide them the digital landscape and footprint, showing them, oh, this is your expertise, which mostly probably for a core competence they know, but they don't know what the other business unit does. That's one point, like kind of know yourself. And that's all digitally, not about talking to experts or doing consulting, but really looking at the data. It means of what patents do they have, what scientific publications do they publish, what is shown on their website, what is in the press, what do they discuss in the press to customers, probably what investments do they have. So that's kind of the one thing which you can easily, quickly measure. And the other point is, of course, if you know yourself, you can also look out. What do you compare with? Is it, let's say, the emerging technologies that you want to know? How good are you compared to in these different emerging technologies or in different industries? Or compare your portfolio with the portfolio of your competitors. So kind of get a big matrix, you could call it, and the landscape and overview that you can compare with. It means of what are your blind spots probably, but also what are the new opportunities, growth opportunities, white spots. Oh, you have a competence in a specific technology applied to, let's say, chemicals, but what about electrics? Or what about the automotive industry? Applying the same solution that you have or technology that you have not thought about applying it to a different industry. And that's what you can very quickly do with our data, which is very powerful, but in the end, it's still also only data. You kind of need to visualize it, you need to communicate it, and in the end, you need to kind of, the decision is not made by us, the decision is made by the innovators, the innovation managers, the decision makers who use the data. That's kind of, our approach. Also interested, since WAZOKU has a very special, in my opinion, USP that you have a lot of, if not million of innovators and experts you can tap on their knowledge and bring together. I would love to understand more how you kind of...
Yeah, I was gonna lean into that a little bit, because I think my opinion on this is that we tend to talk about these things in big data or AI or crowdsourcing, and in reality there is no big data. There is there's the relevant bit, and then 99% of it is noise, right? And you're trying to get into that the je ne sais quoi of like what's important in this. Again, back to this concept of problem solution fit, right? And again, not racing to the solution, like focusing on the right opportunity space to start with. Doesn't need most of the data, right? We learned this in crowdsourcing. So as you said, like part of our business model is a crowd of inventors, entrepreneurs, innovators, and others who work on their own dime, on their own time, on corporate innovation challenges, whether that's for crowd research or crowd innovation or crowd scouting in some way, shape, or form, right? Basically helping companies to accelerate that discovery. At the front end of that, and we were talking about this over dinner last night, right? One of the questions that always comes up is IP and intellectual property, and that's partly on the how do you manage that from the outside in, but also from I don't want to put this information out into the world, or who's going to get it, and like what is the competitive risk and threat of all of that. And most of the time my answer is just don't put it out there then, right? Like you're so nervous about it. We had a really good example of this a few years ago where a global pharmaceutical business came to us, and one of their drugs was having severe adverse events in the market. It didn't do it in clinical trials, but in the market it was having pretty bad side effects on certain patients. And it was, their big blockbuster hope was suddenly, they didn't know why it was doing the things that it do. And obviously what you do in first instance is hire the specialists, hire the big band of, in this case, like every one of the top ophthalmologists on planet Earth was hired, and God knows how much money spent. And they had all the data, all the expertise, all the information, and they waded through it all. And they got some hypotheses, but they couldn't really figure it out, right? What was the biomarker? What was the reason that was specific to these people? And so they came to us and said, can you help us? But we've had every expert look at this, and we can only give you about 10% of the data that they had, because the rest of it's too sensitive. And so I was like, well, we'll give it a go, right? And like, because I don't believe you need all this data quite sometimes. And this is where the power of, of smaller crowds, of diverse perspective, all this stuff we know to be true in the things that we say, but we don't enact in the way that we work, is that the most unlikely of people came back with a solution in 30 days who admitted to us, it's in a book I wrote about the crowd actually, that this was as far away from their domain expertise as they could possibly have got. They nearly didn't bring the solution in because they were too nervous to do so, that outperformed all of these experts in the marketplace in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. And so what was the message of all of that, right? One is you need diversity. Second is that the crowd isn't necessarily the crowd you think it should be, right? And that's true in AI, it's true in data. It's like we're a collection of smaller crowds, of diverse perspectives who find the solution often just outside the realm that you're looking in, whether that's because you see the world through a slightly different lens or because you're not inhibited by all the standard approaches to doing these things, or just because you got lucky, right? Because you're a good researcher and you happen to stumble across the piece of information and went, this might be it. And that network of people who are not pre-screened, not pre-selected, worry far less about the data. They just need to understand broadly what you're looking for. And then armed with synthetic intelligence now as well, AI on top of it, they can go out and do amazing things for you. But these are not one big crowd, not one big data set, not one big anything, right? You're trying to distill all that down into a discrete set of not so much. Otherwise it's too big, it's too noisy, you can't process it all, right? It's just never ending.
But how can you explain, let's say, I mean, these are great examples, but and they are successful. I think even in US, let's say the top 20 dividend champions on the stock market, they all have forms of open innovation. You have great examples. How does it come that it does not get standardized, that there is still within some companies say this reluctance to open up, to really have this ecosystem approach?
So I think that there is a growing movement towards this, that with the drive to try and centralize data because of the AI revolution, that there's a pull now from the organization to take ownership and accountability from this right at the top level, right? If we sit back from all of this and say, should an organization have a chief innovation officer? Well, not if they're not a real C-level person, right? If it's a title by proxy, reporting into, we go around our organizations, where do they report into? Like all over the bloody show. And they're passed around from department to department, changed remits, strategy scope. It's not a real C-level role. The CEO has to own it. The board ultimately and the CEO have to own this agenda, but they don't understand it often, right? And if they do, they're so busy. I sat down with the CEO of a global financial services business as he just exited his CEO role. And I was like, why did we never really get the impacts that we should have done? And he's like, look, I spend most of my day dealing with regulatory stuff and HR related stuff. And you can argue a CEO shouldn't, but they're accountable to the markets in a listed business to do those things and have to get on it. And then there's all this stuff on the side of my desk that I want to be doing that I can't quite get around to, that is down to an organizational level. And there's no professionalization really yet of the things that we're trying to do. So if you take that and apply it back to my point of like, you've got a finance team who are plugged as a vertical in the business, as a function, but work horizontally to make things work. People get paid, suppliers get paid, like the cash is in the bank. All this stuff can be managed and reported and audited and everything else. The data set we are dealing with is as important, if not more important, because it's the value creation for the future. Otherwise, the accountants and the finance people, the salespeople can do all the good work they want, but we'll end up with a declining business or a static business that's got no growth in it. Yet we don't have any professionalism around that, really, right? It's all episodic. Bring in the consultant to help get me out of trouble. Bring in the innovator to do this. Spin up a team to fix something. Change their direction halfway through. Divest that business because it's not quite strategically core to us anymore. It's a mess, right? And then no standardized learning on top of all of that. So look, I think we can get there actually. And don't take this as a huge negative, because I think actually we're moving in a really positive direction, just really slowly, really slowly. I never thought I'd get excited by an ISO standard, but I actually think an ISO standard for innovation might be a good thing that just came out recently, right? Because it starts to professionalize something that just desperately needs professionalizing. And what it'll do is it'll bring more and more people in, partly because they can see a chance to make money in the short term, but it will drive something that the industry needs to have.
Is it a regional issue? Because let's say I travel quite a bit in China, looking at how they do business. Absolutely exciting. An ecosystem approach seems to be standardized. It seems to be in their nature of working. Is this something that typically is seen in EMEA or in US or other parts of the world? Is it regional, or is it something, let's say, that is a more global problem?
I think it's a philosophical challenge in my perspective, right? You may have a different one. There's a book called Cascades, which is not really an innovation book, but it's a really good book by a friend of mine called Greg Sattel, who's written an innovation book, but the book of his that I love is Cascades. And I think that that looks at what drives change and how does real change happen. And this concept that in the world we live in now, that the power doesn't lie at the top of the hierarchy, it lies in the center of the noded, connected world that we live in. And that's where real change happens, right? So you need the strategy and you need the business to give you the direction of where you're trying to run, but you need to empower the organization. I don't think if an organization needs an innovation team, fair enough, right? But it's a project functional team, or it's a capability builder, right? And it can't be both. It will struggle. It will never be resourced enough to be both. It should be a capability builder that's pure remit is to get out of the way as quickly as possible, right? In my opinion. Other people have different takes on it, but you've got to build the capability into the business, because I think that the challenge isn't an innovation challenge. Almost we need to stop using this word, right? Because in reality, what are we trying to do? We're trying to drive the business of tomorrow through net new solutions, right? Whether that's taking products that exist but applying them to new markets, whether it's inventing new markets or new products and services to drive value in some way, shape or form, and all the bits that sit in between all of that. We've got to find better ways of getting those priorities right and getting the teams that already exist tooled up and skilled up and emancipated to go do the work. And a team of 10, 5, 2, 100 innovation people are never going to get it done, right? Like a consultant can't get it done really in most instances, right? You guys can come in and drive real value, but you can only take it so far.
It's very strange because, let's say, continuous improvement is part of any company. That is very normal. It's standardized, it's accepted. It's just challenging, hey, what have we been doing? Learning from it and then taking the next step. Everybody accepts it. But when it comes to innovation, new business development, it's one-offs. It's teams over here, teams over there. It's not standardized. So it's actually interesting to see, let's say, how some organizations deal with it. Some really manage to really bring it in the core. So it's in all the different disciplines. But some companies, let's say, they struggle with it. They are quite mature. They can't find new business development. They are stuck in their old ways of working. And then what? They don't have the culture really to deal with it. So you need to start somewhere really to bring this in. But I really very much like your vision to really bring it in as a standard, all the different disciplines across, let's say, the company.
But just on that point, I'm sorry I'm talking so much as well, that's why I think these standards are important, right? Because if you look back, and I started my professional life more by accident than design. It's kind of contra personality for the entrepreneur disruptor in me, in the world of project, process, black belt, Six Sigma, ISO related quality stuff and everything else, and really kind of deep disciplined work in processes and standardizations and defects and everything else. That is a professionalization of something that now feels very organizationally standard. What's the equivalent in our worlds? There isn't one, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of people that masquerade, and I'm sure they're brilliant at the things that they do, but it's not knitted together, it's not standardized, and there's no profession around it. And so we have to get there. And like, I don't even know when black belts first came around, but project management is a standard, it's a discipline, it's a profession, which feeds into continuous improvement and all these disciplines that come through it, right? We have to bring the same thing in. We don't want to.
This black belt, I can relate to it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe to add to this, I think what is often underestimated, and that also has a little bit to do with ownership, responsibility, is like, for example, transformation is a project. It's not, it's culture, right? And the same with innovation. So you have an innovation department, so they are responsible for innovation. No, they're not. They're just enforcing it. They are the owners, but in the end, you need to build an organization that is capable to transform within departments and actually bring things along to say, this is how we can actually transform our business. That's how we can reach in our department can transform and show what the contribution is to the strategy. And that link is often not going from the management all the way to the people that are on the floor, right? Because they don't know what they bring to the table, so they will not request anything because they know they cannot prove it. And that is also where we with TenOps, for example, want to make that link to what is an opportunity, what is an operation, what does this operation contribute to the leading KPIs? Because if it doesn't, we should be doing it. Of course, that's also a little bit of, there's expertise needed in organizations to build a case for change, so that you can say, how do I calculate opportunity costs? How do I make these things visible? But in the end, the biggest struggle, and I think we see in organizations, is they just don't give the freedom to the people, or the culture to the people, to actually transform or to innovate. Because they say, it's not your ball game, it's innovation department, it's transformation department. They enforce it, but you need to have ways and vehicles for everybody in the organization to transform the business from the bottom up.
Exactly. And therefore, maybe it's not a function, or if it is, it's like, the little extra bit that you bring in to help provide the frameworks and the structures that'll get that specific thing through, the tooling that'll get that specific thing through.
It could be a completely different approach to say, every department has a transformation or innovation ambassador.
Exactly.
Instead of having a department, because you basically take it away from these departments. Of course, if that's, depending on the company, if it's realistic to pull off, but I think that shift up might need to happen at some point, right?
Yeah. But I think the resources already exist. I don't think you need lots more people. I think actually you could have fewer people and be more effective, particularly if you start to embrace technology, data, and open talent and crowdsourcing, because you spin up and spin down, right? When you need to. And like those things can be faster, cheaper, more effective. They're not riskier, right? And yet, but you got to change. And part of it's changing incentives, right? This is not how people work and think. And, figuring out ways to make that possible. I have a ridiculous situation right now where the one of my clients doesn't want to recognize, they don't want to declare the value that they have realized out of more of their continuous improvement type innovation work, because they fear they'll lose their budget next year. And so like they won't show the ROI on the projects because of the incentive isn't there for them to do so. And so I'm like, what do you do with that, right? It's like, well, and does it exist or does it not exist? It absolutely exists. But so not only is it not, do people not measure it, even when they do, sometimes they don't want to show it because the incentives and the organizational structures, which is why you've got to bring the business in.
We had something similar, let's say, where we could show, let's say, that we had up to 80% productivity gains. But it also comes with a consequence.
Exactly.
And there is a sensitivity even around benefits. So what we typically do is when we run a program, it's also bringing everybody on board, and just showing the benefits. That's part of it, but that's not, let's say, the whole picture. So we also really show them, hey, this was how you were doing this. So also, let's say, and this was the status quo. You were also not really satisfied with that part. So that's also part of it. Then imagine yourself, let's say, working in 6 months or 9 months or 12 months from now. This will be your new reality, to really make that concrete picture of how that near future will look like. So that also part of the element. And then what are the steps? So what I will be doing next week, so really make it concrete. So all those 4 elements we typically bring in, because just showing the benefits and then people speculating over what kind of impact it could have on an organization, or potentially also on jobs. So that's also part of the game. That's not good enough. So all the elements need to be covered to really bring people on board, to really also help them to make that transformation.
Yeah, I know you asked a question earlier around, is this regional or whatever? That is where some of the regional complexities come in as well, right? Because culturally it's difficult, employment law-wise it's difficult, regulation-wise it's difficult, and for good reasons as well. However, in a world that's becoming, harder to cross borders, and we're not having as many children, therefore we're going to have to find ways of generating productivity gains in some way, shape or form. We need to get better at recognizing these things and prioritizing them, because if we don't, we'll get gobbled up by the people that don't have as much structure in the ways that they grow businesses and think about talent, and partly because we've got growth economies potentially, but also the speed of change at a very low cost has to change, right? We have to think about that, and that we'll see that very profoundly in markets like Germany, where you're going to big automotive challenges, right? Like, how do we do stuff when the Chinese manufacturers can work much quicker, right? What might take 2, 5, 10 years here can be done in 6, 12 months at a tenth of the cost. Like that's, of course, therefore we see like protectionism and tariffs, but it's not going to fix the problem really. And so we have to get faster and more agile and think about things differently. And we can, but it's going to have some consequence somewhere, right? Because 80% of the cost of these things is headcounts and talents. And so start thinking about things in a very different way. And if we're not even bold enough to start making those recognitions, then we're dead before we start, right? Like that's a real challenge.
But I think it's also, you raise a very important point there, is there's lack of resources, right? So, I mean, of course, automotive is maybe an heavy example, but why would you fire people that are talented, right? But because we're very strict to, oh, you have been hired as an inside sales manager, so you will be inside sales manager for the rest of your life. Now, if I have, let's say, an industry or a company that needs to diversify due to automotive, for example, let's digitalize it, take out the costs, and make these inside sales people say, you're up for an account manager role in a different division, at a different market segment. And you grow these people and you take them into a different role. Or you say you're a junior inside salesperson, why don't you become a digital account manager for all the tail customers, right? So, and then that flexibility is very often missing, to see we have opportunities here where we need people, here we need to lay off people. Let's work with it. Let's see what we can do. And I was once, years back, I was asked to come to a company in Nashville because I was bought by one of my previous employers. And they basically said we need to lay off a lot of people that are still linked to the old organization. And we tremendously need to improve. We need to digitalize and whatever. So in that week, I think 6 to 7 people have been laid off. And then there's the guy from Central coming, a young guy with a digital focus. Not a good mix. But then the general manager said, look, I want to introduce Martin. I asked him to come. He was not sent. I asked him to come to improve things, right? So I sat down with them. I said, look, if you sign up for the role as a salesperson, did you say, I love to send data sheets, or I love to send price lists that you already have in your inbox? You know what I mean? So there is a value shift. I mean, 10, 20 years back, there has been a lot of value in people picking up the phone. And that is also where you put your costs, because there's the value and there's the costs. Good. Now people want to do self-service. Distribution partner want to have it all online. So the value is created at a different point, but you still have the costs there. You still have the people there. So what if we take out all the stuff that you don't like? So we often also ask, you know, what tasks do you have that do not add value to your customer relation? And if you have the chance to get rid of it, you would like to get rid of it. We calculate your opportunity cost, say, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to fix these things. They can focus on sales. We take out the costs and we get more sales with the same people. So I think that flexibility is often not there because they stick too much to roles, and same with innovation department, transformation department. Or it needs to be there, you need to do this. And I think that is a shift of mind that needs to happen in the end. Yeah.
I completely agree. And you almost need to start by helping to see that though, right? To visualize that entire pipeline of opportunities. And then I think you can actually parallel task a lot of them, right? You guys can do great work. We can bring open talent and crowd in to help really accelerate those things much quicker and get us out of these very slow cycles. So
how do you deal with that mindset? We work, for example, quite a bit with the chemical industry. There you see typically, let's say, investments between 2 to 5% of revenue that go into R&D. And they have a lot of bright people, but then they also face the challenge, how to get more out of this. So you have these bright people, you also want to make them successful. They have amazing ideas, but somehow they also need to materialize. And that is not only something that you do in R&D. How can you, let's say, also with your services, help those people to really become successful?
So I think there's 2 lenses on that, right? And we've got a lot of stories out there around work that we've done with NASA. And, you know, NASA employs some of the smartest people in the world, right? Like rocket scientists and others. And so there was a big psychological shift that went through. NASA built out its center of excellence for collaborative innovation, its open talent and crowdsourcing capabilities, essentially. And the initial reaction from the people inside that organization was, well, that's what I'm the preeminent expert. I've got, you know, multiple PhDs and et cetera, et cetera. It's my job to do this, right? And yes, you've got great ideas. And often those great ideas will go and drive huge amounts of, you know, value in accelerating discovery or whatever. But ultimately, your job is to make sure that the astronauts we send to space come back safely, right? And that we do that as safely and as efficiently as we possibly can. And so, yes, your job is to have ideas, but your job is to also make sure we've had every idea possible, right? And that we've really thought through those things, because no matter how brilliant you are, I can give you 1,000 or more examples of, as I did earlier, right, where the non-specialist outperformed the specialist in it with a piece of information. The specialist now still needs to take that and apply it in a different way. And so if your job is to keep astronauts safe and bring them back to work, or whatever your version of that is in the work that you do, why wouldn't you want to therefore turn every rock possible, right? Go out and do all the discovery and accelerate that information back into you. That's what crowd research can give you. Then you want to go out and, you know, build the evidence bank as quickly as possible to support it. Again, market research, crowd research can support with that, or rapidly scaling prototypes, or building algorithms quickly. And again, you're going to bring the organization to do that. It'll take you a long time. You're going to hire people to do it. Not in this market, highly unlikely. And so using crowd and open talent to accelerate those things is a low barrier. It's lower cost. It can be done very, very, very quickly. And it gets you to another stage gate, right? And then we evaluate, is this driving the expected value, right? Have we moved something left or right? Is the organization still strategically aligned with it? Is the trend still there? Et cetera, et cetera. And this has taken weeks and months, and cost, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, rather than sinking 2 billion to this 2, 3, 4, 5 year project that's only really appraised at the end of it, right? And as we know, like, very few of them actually get anywhere.
We have quite a pragmatic approach to that, and we actually worked with a lot of R&D teams and also using MAPEGY during brainstorm sessions. And it's very interesting, because if you brainstorm, you typically brainstorm within a box, within your industry, within your framework, within your knowledge about a certain chemistry. And it's very interesting, especially during the diverging phase, to actually also get outside in perspective, and not by Googling, but especially by using MAPEGY, by using the topic map, by using the matrix. It opens up the mind. And I think there it also goes back to the theory of inventive problem solving, to TRIZ. There you also have that functional modeling, where you take aspects of different industries, different technologies, and you bring them in. And actually they're working with MAPEGY during those brainstorm sessions with R&D. Very interesting, because you get another set of ideas on the table. So it really opens up your mind. And I think even if you would combine it then further with, let's say, what you are doing in a business to get even experts at the table, I think you tremendously open up, let's say, the wealth of opportunities. And if you're able to do that and then also converge and then select the right ones that are linked towards real life problems, I think then you really have something where you can tremendously accelerate it, but also get much more out of your R&D.
And the one thing what you said is, like, using these methods, let's say the data-driven methods, is one point. The other point is also, when I look back what I did 20 years ago, where I was one of the few future researchers and innovation managers at Volkswagen, and probably such an analysis cost me like 2-3 weeks doing a deep dive on why is Volkswagen not or doing fuel cells, and how is Toyota there. And now you can do it within seconds, and it's not only part of a expert team. We talked about the growth mindset, not within bringing it outside in or giving it to some departments, but building the growth mindset in every individual employee and stakeholder of the company. And with these tools and digital tools, if you apply them and give it at the hands of every employee, or let's say democratize these tools and providing these insights easily, tangible, actionable, not only to a few, but to many at the organization, that's very, very powerful, kind of to also ignite the idea of the growth mindset. So it's of course not data only, it's not tools, it is the company culture, and it's a philosophical question as well. But at least that's our approach to this huge topic, right?
And the understanding also of what you're looking at, right? So you could see news patterns, data, or whatever it is, and you could have different people interpreting it in a different way. One sees a threat, the other one sees an opportunity. The other one sees a company to maybe work together with. So, and then I think that is, but we use also MAPEGY because we come to conclusion with having an entrepreneurial mindset. And then we challenge customers to say, look, this is the evidence that we found. this is our conclusion. So what do you see when you look at this, right? And the good thing is then if you do this also in a kind of a workshop, looking also at the risk and impact of certain directions, that they get very quickly an understanding and can get by themselves to the same conclusion, which is then a good confirmation for us. And you don't have any negotiations. But I think that's, if you look at a company as a whole, right, this is a challenge. Because again, you know, if management and maybe someone who is confronted with these kind of decisions based on evidence, customer conversations whatsoever on a daily basis is a different one than anyone else in the department, but someone who might have a stake in that decision on moving forward. And then I think that is something that of course is very sharing, also coming back to the responsibility of what I do with data, how much data do I need, and because in the end the question is who's looking at it. And not do I have all the data, because the more data you have, the more also you can interpret maybe wrong things into it, right? It's the same, you go to a restaurant and there are only 5-star ratings and someone gave 1 star. I'm not sure. So that's a bit what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah, like 2 thoughts about it. One is like what I see, even if you have the same report, same analysis, providing it to company A or company B, they're likely going to have a different take on it, and they've built a different strategy. Kind of, we could call it like ethical or different moral or different strategic questions and missions that they have. But it's really interesting to see how different perspectives can lead to different opportunities or strategies. That's one point. And the other point, interesting, what you said, Tim, before, is like treats problems and solutions. We discussed it before. If you give it to, let's say, if there's a problem, like in patent, the patents or scientific publications, they discuss problems, and the experts discuss the problems, and the experts also provide solutions. But mostly and likely, the very successful solutions, they are not going to come from the experts who are dealing with a very specific problem that they discuss in the publication. So it's really interesting to talk to customers, talk to consumers, to look into news, to look into websites, kind of connect the problems and potential solutions and build the link there. So in the end, data tools can help, but in the end, it's still humans again who kind of can make these links and stay kind of.
Maybe to add to the expert role, how I see it at least, is that you need to have experts to define facts, right? So you have an expert in finance who said we do have a growth problem. We have someone who says, yeah, this technology would work, this wouldn't work, right? So basically you define certain facts, and you also define certain indicators that show you the market goes this direction or whatever. If you can agree as a management team, having different experts actually feeding into the conversation, what is the truth at the moment? There might be some variables that you cannot foresee, that you don't know, but you define what is the truth. On that basis, we're going to take the decision now. And I think that is where you need the experts to validate and actually feed into this discussion. But it doesn't mean that, and that is often happening, is that then also the expert needs to take the decision. Because the expert is an expert in his field, and with all the respect, not with the other fields, and that's what the management is for, right? So that's how I also see a little bit the expert role. It's a critical one, but it should not be the holistic one. I'm the expert now, I take the decision, right? So, and I think that is it's an important one, yeah.
And it's also, I think it's also a very personal one. Also as an expert, at a certain moment, it's about admitting that you don't know everything. So you also have to look around. And a lot of people, they are the expert on a certain topic, but not having the answer, that's kind of an inconvenient matter.
Yes, exactly.
And it doesn't feel right. So all the solutions that we also discuss is about, let's say, opening your scope, looking into different fields, getting that outside in perspective, talking to experts, let's say, all around the globe, facilitate that, let's say, also by what you do. It's a tremendous help. 20 years or 25 years ago, I was working in a factory, and it was my job to look at a problem that was already there for 20 years. So everybody told me it cannot be done. We already looked at it, we modeled it, the chemistry, the thermodynamics, it was products sticking in a reactor. And there we actually started with functional modeling using TRIS, looking outside in. What are the other industries doing that are dealing with sticking? What kind of solutions do they have? And that brought, in the end, that brought a solution. But it was very inconvenient situation, because something comes on the table from the outside, not by the expert or people that are seen as the expert. I think that also needs a little bit of a mind shift to say, hey, it's not like I need to know everything. I need to make sure that I find all best possible solutions, whether that is at NASA or also what you mentioned. So it's also a bit of a mind shift, and I think these kind of technologies and these ways of working, especially if you manage to standardize them and if people open their scope, it would be amazing. And you already see, let's say, some industries they are intermingling, not only with digital, but you see medical with food, with flexible electronics, making combinations. There are so many possibilities between different industries. So if you break down not only the silos within an organization, but even between industries, that would be amazing. There are so many opportunities, and I think what you do and also what you do, it really facilitates that transition. So I'm very curious to see what kind of opportunities that is going to bring in the near future.
A lot, I think, is the answer.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot.
But Peter, you mentioned, hey, we also want to look at 2025.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
I'm also curious to hear for you. Let's say, what are your biggest opportunities for 2025? What do you see?
I mean, for us personally, it's really interesting. I mean, let's say if I talk to, I've studied, I have a PhD in artificial intelligence and 20 years, and like, okay, we thought like we are going to disrupt the world since that's what is happening right now. But of course, we need to have a growth mindset ourselves, since we are challenged by these large language models, big companies, and we need to be very agile and take on the right opportunities. So that's challenging for us, but it's a huge, huge opportunity. And talking about, for us, it's what I see is we have like different businesses. We have the Scout platform, which is the platform for the experts, right? But we also, this platform is fed by our API. And what I see, we want to, and we will go, I would call it micro and multi-agent compatible. So that, we've talked about these indicators before. If you want to measure innovation, you need KPIs that you kind of measure innovation by. And if you can provide with our API, numbers that you can update on a weekly, monthly basis for specific key performance indicator for specific questions that you have in mind, then it's very powerful if you can provide these singular indicators into complex workflows, into complex platforms. And it's a very interesting, could become a very interesting ecosystem. That's kind of one take for me, right? And of course, as you said, building up opportunities. That's why we sit here together, since I'm definitely an expert in my business, but I have so many blind spots, and I want to have this growth mindset that everyone in every company in big enterprises need it, but also me as an entrepreneur, I need to be very flexible and open-minded to kind of figure out what are new opportunities. And we sit here together, we do business together. That's what I'm very much looking forward to. That's like my main takes.
You talk about these multi-noded, multi-agents, I guess interfaces is perhaps, I think it's an ecosystem play again as well to a degree, right? I think that will be a big drive into 2025 and beyond as a pretty rapid evolution. I think it's important because I had a lot of conversations with people as you get into this very opaque topic like innovation, like all these other things. AI is it's like, oh, we're doing AI. Brilliant. We're working with the hyperscalers on these things. So it's like, and sitting there and thinking, but it's all well and good, but we're already doing this. We're working with NVIDIA or Google or Microsoft or somebody else, right? I think it's very important that's happening because it's driving an understanding and a capability at a thin horizontal layer in the organization. The reality is then the specialisms, as I said, there's not one data, right? There's not big data. That's why we've changed the language. There's not one crowd. There's not one thing. We were talking about this a bit yesterday, right? Just take the topic of patterns. You can peel that and peel that and peel that back, right? The lenses we were talking about earlier. So trying to train something from an agentic perspective with the innovation lens on this, right? Of like, am I prioritizing the right opportunities? Am I aligning that to the right solutions? Requires a very dedicated and committed niche focus, right? So within the broad horizontal, We're going to have to find lots and lots of great work. That's why we're working together. It's why I'm excited for what we can all do together, is that there is a need to bring the best of the best of the best of those at a very focused level to really start to understand what's really in that data. What can I really infer from it? And that's going to take a lot of minds, right? A lot of minds, a lot of understanding, and at every topic level, right? We'll do it well on stuff that's got sort of natural language capabilities around it. But if you get into the more complex molecular world, which is different, right? And it's like interpreting that and machine training it. And there's a whole cluster of focus going into that, a lot of money going into understanding different forms of data, different forms of information to help drive decision making in different parts of the innovation ecosystem as well. All of that needs to start to coalesce, because they can't exist as discrete black boxes, as discrete standalone capabilities, if we want to really amplify what the organizations could do. Right? So I think there's a big driver there, which compute will solve bits of, but it's going to take a long time. Right? This data is not easy to get to. We can't digitize basic processes. So digitizing complex things is going to take a long time, and it's going to take multiple waves of probably quite big disappointment. But we'll make strides, right? We'll continue to make those strides. But the work that you guys are doing in the very specific areas you do, it's hugely important, right? To make sense of a data set and to prioritize which bits of that data set really make sense, right? If you get pulled by everybody in all these different directions, I'm working at a fairly big horizontal and using crowdsourcing on top of that to help coalesce those data sets in a different way. But my big horizontal is still very niche in the very, very big horizontal that the hyperscalers are looking at, right? And so it drills down and it drills down and it drills down, and getting those priorities right, it's complicated. And everyone's priority is their own priority, but where's the biggest impact? Where's the biggest opportunity? That's where you guys can really help.
It's all about drilling down. Let's say in the end, let's say for all of our clients, without any exception, it's all about finding that niche. The difference really is in the details. And that's also why generic reports or generic intelligence or it doesn't work. It's not going to bring you the differentiator that you really need. So you need to dive deep, and you need to do that in an efficient way with a broad scope, and getting, let's say, external experts on board, let's say, or all the data that you can find. So for all of our clients, without any exception, that brings a difference. Yeah. So I was interrupting you.
No, all good. I just want to actually go in the same direction. I think what we also talked about it yesterday, again, what is the truth, right? So I mean, if I'm now a manufacturer, or I'm in consumer goods, I have different ways of looking at the world. I have my own universe. So if someone tells you, oh, you're this company, so these are your competitors, I'm like, I don't see this as my competitor, but this one I see as my competitor. So you basically have your own universe, your own ecosystem. That also means that you have your own indicators or ratios you look at, which could be KPIs, it could be the number of patents for certain markets, for certain application areas, where you say, okay, these are for me indicators that something is happening on the market, right? And then generalizing this would also means you generalize the business that you're in, which you cannot do. So it needs to be as specific as the business you're in. Of course, in the end, it comes down to the same data, but you need to create a framework to say, what is for me an indicator that the market is going into a certain direction, or competitors going into a certain direction. What we do with customers also scenario planning. So basically, not like in a scientific way, but we basically say, look, we see certain trends in the market. This could happen. This is very likely to happen. How do you react to it? And how do we see that we're actually going down that path? And if we go down that path, do we have already a plan to mitigate? And is there something that we maybe need to already prepare now, right? So, and again, you know, and to a certain extent, it's only data, but generalizing it wouldn't do it any good. You need to really say, what are for my business, my industry, my universe, the indicators that something is happening, right? And then I think that is also, it is a challenge, but it can be done.
And that we as a company should do something in that space, right? Do we have specific company strengths? Is there a strategic alignment for the next relevant period of time to really commit to that? Because I think still too often you go, oh yeah, there's a big trend here, there's a big opportunity, company jumps in, it starts moving in a direction and actually performing quite well, but the strategy shifts because it was never really core, right? You know, you could take that around electric vehicle charging points, right? You know, that's an interesting one. There's a big trend in it. A lot of the automotive players jump in on top of it, and now they're trying to divest those businesses. The person that was, you know, following off the back of someone like a Tesla, who never really wanted to be in that space, but had to get into it to build the infrastructure to support the computer that they built on wheels, right? To get out there and do things. And so, like, there's a trend there. Should the company be in it? We're seeing more and more trying to divest out of it, and they'll probably write those off rather than actually make money out of them, which they could in a different way, right? And so there's a lot of, too many times I think there's like, it was a good thing, it was a good trend, but should we be doing it? Do we have a real strength there that we're going to commit to from an asset perspective?
But there's also the big difference on if you want to do it really black and white, there are two types of companies, right? The ones that are leading, that are proactive. We take the risk, we see opportunities, figure it out, we mitigate the risk by, say, we're creating a pilot project or a test, and we see how it goes, and then we scale it, right? So these are the proactive companies. But as soon as you are reactive, you're not a leading company in the market. It's a fact, right? So that means as soon as you say, okay, we are stuck in growth, or we are not moving forward, we have issues, how can we mitigate it? How can we de-risk it? You are reactive. Something is happening on the market you were not prepared for. You have not actually made plans to go against it. And then that is also what we want to do. We want to get companies from, okay, we're now in a reactive mode for certain circumstances, whatever it might be. It could also be sometimes the nature of the business model that is very specific. You do, you basically mass productions, and the world was happy, then China, India entered, and now things look a bit different. But I think we want to really train companies and educate them to look at things proactively. It's very scary to say we are the first mover, right? Especially in times with AI and when business models linked to AI and whatever. But doing that in an explorative way rather than kind of all in can have a lot of advantages, because then you create also the mindset of proactiveness, because in the end, otherwise you are just reactive in the market.
Yeah, but there can only ever be, by definition, one first mover in a specific thematic.
Yeah, but like I said, so there was a bit black and white, but you know,
I know.
You know what I mean, right? So
yeah,
I think
I do.
if you not if you not innovate and actually are happy to explore new things and not just explore that maybe your competitor already explored 5 years ago, but you do it a little bit different, I think then you will not be a leading company. So I think that's a critical point. Yeah.
No, which is fair.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that it's a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't happen to you.
Yeah.
I have to go into this, or
Exactly.
I can't follow it anymore. The outcome can still be the same, but at least it's a choice to say yes, that is us. We do have the capabilities, or we don't have the capabilities, and we want to build them up. So we are going to invest in that part. So at least you have a deliberate choice whether to do something or not.
I would love to elaborate on what you said before, like this deep dive perspective again, since it came something into my mind, where when 20 years ago we presented reports that we are working hard to the CEO, probably 10 slides. And then, of course, he asked us, and then he had all these experts he was talking to, asking them and getting the proof. Whereas we talked about bottom up and getting the insights everywhere in the company. And I see there's also change now happening that doesn't matter if you're the CEO, if you want to have the big bird's perspective on all your markets and the whole competitive landscape. And probably you also want to deep dive down to the only patent or the specific investment. At least you want to trust the data, so you want to have the capability doing it. Probably you're not going to do it since you don't have the time, but at least you have the capabilities, and vice versa, bottom up as well. If you're the small expert, let's call it, with a very specific niche, you still also want to go up and see, oh, that's where I am. I can move down again, which was never possible with all the consulting services and like doing it hands-on or manually, which is possible now with data and visualization. So there's a lot of power into providing insights, actionable at the right time, at the right space, and it's very, very powerful. That was like an idea which you kind of had these deep dives, right?
Done. Yeah. Done.
We had this nice ecosystem discussion as well. I mean, what time is it now? We are more than 1 hour already in talk. Good.
I think we're quite. Did we miss stuff? I think we're quite good, right?
But quite good. It was important that everybody has also a short pitch about this company and kind of that you can cut it. Yeah, news piece, I don't know.
it's interesting how we kept going nonstop, and then all of a sudden everybody stops. Like,
Exactly.
okay, I think we are good
We're
now.
all-
I
yeah,
just need a bike race. So
Yeah.
that's my.
exactly.
No, it's. I mean, it's an interesting conversation, and I think if we somehow also give a follow up, it's also good to maybe that we can start using, let's say, some tangible examples.
Yeah.
Then maybe the conversation is a bit. You have great examples. Yeah, we have difficulties because we are not allowed to talk about quite some stuff. So, but using examples that makes it really tangible.
No, exactly.
I love that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why the open innovation stuff's really nice, because by definition it's
Yes.
open.
Oh, yeah.
So like, it's out there
Oh.
and very easy to interact with. And actually, we did back onto the data piece on that. Like, we did a nice piece of work using the data capabilities that we would do with customers on our own crowd data. Should you look at like our WAZOKU crowd website, it's front and center on, and rather than spinning up case studies, we ran all of the data, ran all of the analysis, and then use natural language clustering to pull it together to showcase all the different areas that at the top end, because there's a very long tail of others, the crowd has been deployed in, right? And you can sort of click through those and drill right down into the real examples in pretty much any thematic, right? And all these examples that kind of come to life. And it's just a nice way of, in there was this whole data set that I've been sitting on, millions and millions of different bits of story. But it was quite hard to tell, right? And I think that if there is a job of an innovation team out there, potentially it's as chief storytellers and marketeers of what's actually happened, because it can be hard, right? I work on really cool stuff every single day. We solve stuff that improves health outcomes, makes people safer, gets people to Mars. But telling those stories, keeping on top of them to tell them back to the business and to tell them to the world is really hard.
But
right?
you also realize that, let's say, there are R&D teams with thousands and thousands of people that really take their job serious.
Yeah.
And now somebody else comes and says, well, hey, maybe you should take an outside-in perspective. Maybe somebody else has the answer. And that is, let's say, I think for quite some experts, really a difficult mindset stage, because they have built their status and their career on being
The whole
expert.
identity.
Yeah. Exactly. So even whom they are, let's say, is based on that. And let's say when I was thinking about it, let's say during our conversation, and I think we might need to deepen, let's say, in that part, because in the end, let's say, getting then also other experts and getting more data, the outside in view, what for our clients works so well, is that we give them the outside in perspective on their own company, and somewhere in the back of their mind they know it, and I'm like, shit, yeah,
Yep.
shit.
Oh,
Exactly.
You see, like,
It happens every time. They're like, assholes.
exactly.
That's what happens.
Yep. But I think there's a way of flipping that. We used the NASA example earlier, right? Which is, your job isn't necessarily to be chief ideator. It's to bring astronauts home safely or whatever it might be. And therefore doing that in a more holistic way is one way of just thinking about this, right? And use this in your toolkit to do it. The flip side of it is, though, that a lot of these people have created IP, they've created something, right? A lot of it sits on the shelf, underutilized, either unutilized or underutilized. And so as a mechanism to say, like, no, we're here to showcase your brilliance. We're here to maximize its impact on planet Earth, because that's what a lot of the research people and the R&D people, and they want to see, they don't want to build something that sits on a shelf in a cupboard behind a patent that nothing ever happens with. They want to get it out there and driving value. And so flipping that as a reverse innovation story that says, no, I want to do more with this. I want to get this out there and maximize. And sure, the flip might be that you find other people's ideas that you bring in to maximize future innovations and future developments. Is this ecosystem thinking, right? And it's that there'll be some solutions there'll be some problems that are looking for your solution, but the business just has no idea. They don't understand what your solution really is, right? Because they're not as brilliant as you. So we're going to help to demystify that, and we're going to help to match it to this problem area or identify a new problem area that this thing could supercharge. And so there's a lot in that, right? That we've invented a lot of things in this world that haven't yet found, the solution hasn't found its problem. We don't need to invent more of those things. Let's go pander to that side of the ego. Let's go pander to that side of the narrative of like, no, I want to get your great idea and amplify it and maximize it in the right problem spaces, because the problems exist and the solutions exist. They just don't know how to find each other, right? And so there's a big piece of that we need to, it plays into hubris, it plays into identity, it plays into everything else. But the flip side of it is also true.
Do you work with universities? Because let's say, I mean, a lot of the smart people come from there, great ideas, they go and work for a company. But typically, let's say, they come up with the great ideas. And now what you're asking them is to say, hey, up and up. It might also be that the great ideas come from the outside.
Yeah.
But you are the one that's going to bring it forward. But let's say, I mean, it's a bit of a shift in how people work in their mind. Is this also something that should already start at universities?
Yeah, and it does. It does. Yeah.
But not all of them.
No, exactly. And it's still, it's still an evolving thing.
Yeah.
But again, like a lot of the time in universities, we've done research, we've got PhDs and all these other things. It's like, how many of those started with a real identified, tangible, known problem versus a passion project or an area of a solution that's doesn't really know there's a problem out there. Now, again, there will be a problem out there, if not today, tomorrow, right? That
maybe in a
could have been
different field.
done, but maybe in a different field, right?
Okay.
And that's also very, very common, which is why you need to open it up into a different lens. And I think that's where you can bring people in. But sure, like I actually think it can even start younger than that. Like some of the crowd work we do looks at at youth innovation and different forms of insights and getting ideas. You have to deal with that in a different way, and it's complicated, and IP is a different thing at that level and everything else, but it's possible. And it requires a different mindset, right? But it can be done, and it can be done at scale, and it can be done very cost effectively, and it can accelerate. I think the other piece is, what's worse, right? Is it worse to be the preeminent expert who spends 2 years and millions of dollars to not get anything out the end of it? Or to be the preeminent expert that first of all does, and then comes for the crowd project and says, help me, right? Or to flip it the other way around and spend very little money validating your hypothesis and then accelerating the piece that you do afterwards, because there's still a lot of work to do to drive that thing through. And you can use the crowd, and you can use experts, and you can use professional services support as you go through all of that, and you should be doing, right? You need to constantly keep revalidating and re-researching and re-crowdsourcing as you go through. But like, surely, and like that's the approach right now, is I do everything conventionally. My success rate hasn't changed in forever. It costs a lot of money to mostly not reach success. Why not invert it? It's proven. And so but it's not endemic, right? It's not structurally the way that we're trained to do it. And part of the challenge for that is it's not what's taught, right? Like we're taught in business school ways of doing things. We're taught ways of research. We're trained as the preeminent experts, not the other way around. And so, yeah, there's a lot of unpicking to do in all of that for sure. But we have to. If we want to really push and drive, we have to.
Great, yeah.
And we will. Collectively, we can. So anyway, I think everyone, you need a wee, don't you? Like, let's go. We could keep him here until he just...
Two more topics.
Wait. I think we're ready, right? We are good, very good.